just wanted to welcome everyone. I'm going to do introductions of Bijal and Beth in just a minute, but I just wanted to let you know that we are recording this and it will be on our website, and it will also be all over social media after this is done, so you can absolutely share this with someone else. We would love for you to do that. Again, if you can't turn your own camera on, oh, we see hello. Hey there. Seeing everybody say hello in the chat. That's fabulous. Yes, say hello in the chat and put any questions that you have in the Q&A. Beth and I will see that and we'll ask those questions to Bijal. Also, I can turn your mic on. If you can't turn your camera on, I can turn your mic on and you'll be able to ask your own question. And that is because we want this to be interactive. This is about you asking questions and making comments. So that's why it's really important for you to be a part of this. And now Beth is going to talk about the book giveaway.
Hello, everyone, and I'm so glad you're joining us. You are going to love listening to Bijal talk about this amazing book. I don't know, those of you who have read it, I'm sure loved it, and that's why you're here. And the others that haven't are going to love it. So we're really fortunate. Bijal has given 2 books that will be signed, and we will be sending them out to 2 winners from this panel today. So I'm going to do a draw a little bit later, and hopefully one of you will take away a signed book. What we'll need you to do is, if I draw your name, just send in your address and we'll mail you the book. So good luck to everybody, and I hope you enjoy our chat today.
And our email is in the chat if you need that, but you can always find it at the bonnellfoundation.org if you forget to copy that. So I am just going to start with an introduction of Bijal Trivedi. As you know, she is the author of Breath from Salt. And she is also an award-winning journalist who does features about biology, about medicine and health. And she is currently the senior science editor for National Geographic. And Bill Gates picked her book as one of his top 5 for 2020, in the winter of 2020. This is just a short introduction about her. She has so many more credentials, but we want to get started. So we're grateful to have her. The same can be said for Beth. Beth Vanstone is a CF mom to Maddie, and she has another daughter without cystic fibrosis. Beth successfully advocated for Kalydeco to be added to the Ontario drug formulary, and she also advocated for Trikafta to also be on that formulary, and she just advocates tirelessly. I also wanted to tell you a little bit quickly about the Bonnell Foundation. We assist families with lung transplant grants, financial assistance, and education scholarships, and we do a lot of advocacy. I'm Laura Bonnell, in case you don't know, and we're working on a lot of advocacy right now in Michigan for the Rare Disease Advisory Council and so many other things, just making everyone aware of prior auth and everything that you all know about copay accumulators and all of that. So we're going to get started, but I also wanted to tell you where we all are in the world and our country. So I'm in London, England right now because my oldest daughter, Molly, who obviously has cystic fibrosis, both my daughters do, graduated today. Because of the pandemic, it was delayed 2 years. So she got her master's degree today. And it was such a proud day to watch her through that ceremony. She's, like I said, on Trikafta, and it's changed our lives. So I thought it was important to share because, you know, we didn't always know if she would, you know, be around to see this day. And so glad. It was just wonderful. Beth is live from Canada and Bijal is live from Washington, D.C. So let's get started. So Bijal, what kind of decision was it a big decision to decide who was going to be in the book, or did it just evolve? I mean, you have parents, you have scientists, everybody that made up the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation.
There are a lot of people in this book. This is true. I think when I met, I knew I wanted to include the scientists. I knew that I wanted to include the change makers at the foundation. And I knew I wanted to tell the stories of families, because without the families, I mean, the rest doesn't hold together. It's important, it's exciting from a scientific viewpoint, but it's isolated. And I wanted to tell the story of families who have worked so hard and, as you said, so tirelessly advocating for their kids, for the medicines to be made. And so after I met Joe and Kathy O'Donnell, I knew that I had to tell this story. I knew that I wanted them to be sort of the central family in my story, because they have been involved for more than 50 years and all the way through, even after they lost Joey. And it was just such a heroic story. And they were such warm, amazing people that I just, it fell into place for me the second I met them. So, that's how I decided. And, I knew that I would incorporate other families, other stories, but they were sort of my beginning point.
And to anyone that read the book, they know how all the stories came to life. And I just think it was such a gift that you gave to us. It was like a play-by-play. And some of the things Beth and I know, like we were there, or, for parts that were in your book. There were gatherings where we were speaking to the FDA. We were there, and like to see it on paper in your book was thrilling. And I just wonder what, you probably get a lot of feedback from people who were like, oh, I was there, or you told this so beautifully. How does that make you feel?
Oh, well, it's like a writer's dream, right? Because, I had an editor for Discover magazine. And one of the pieces of advice that she gave me was always tell the story as if you're looking over the person's shoulder. So for scientists, I tried to get inside their head and get their reaction when they were looking at a piece of data or seeing a cell do something, or, if a parent was in a room with a physician, what were they seeing? What were they doing? So the over the shoulder was how I tried to do everything. I tried to tell it from that person's perspective, because having the voice of God narrator does not work for me. I don't like it. So I wanted to get everybody's viewpoint as if they were telling their share of the story. So, I mean, being told that people really connected with it or it came to life for them, there's no greater compliment for me. So.
Well, I felt, and I feel like there's going to be a part 2 of this book. You may be starting to write it now, but looking, and when I read that book and I saw the parents and the collaboration of science and the foundation, philanthropists and parents and patients all working together step by step, fighting for the diagnosis in itself was so huge and very complicated with this disease and interesting. So I liked the science, but I love the human part of it too. And I felt that. And, it was amazing to be able to watch all that, to see where we are today with Trikafta that's hitting, the 90% of our population. That's why you're going to do part 2, because we're going to get the last 10 and we're going to have the cure. So, but I love that. And I think that a lot of the people that are parents and family members here can really identify with that, digging in and working and not stopping to get through this, right? So did you experience a lot of that from the different families that you talked to, or?
Every family told me a slightly different slice of the story, which is why it was so challenging to add them all up, because it was almost like a jigsaw puzzle. People would be working on this part of the advocacy or this part of the advocacy, and finding a slot for all of that in the book. And, I've told the stories of very few families, and there's so many more advocates. There's so many fundraisers involved. And some of the feedback I got was, why didn't I include such and such who has been a fundraiser? And the truth is, if I had many more names in this book, I might have killed my editor, my book editor, because it is hard to follow everybody's story. So I tried to keep it as linear as possible, so that you could follow the progress of the foundation, of the families, of the drugs, and keep everything moving in one direction and sort of in the same lane. Otherwise it's a crazy story.
And I think one thing we were talking about before we started this webinar is we miss people. It's so good to be here with people. Sadly, we can't see their beautiful faces, but
Yeah.
Bob Emmelkamp, he has a question, and I can read it, Bob, if you don't want to speak, but I am going to try. And I just pushed, oh, there you are.
Talking permitted.
Okay.
There you go.
Yay. Okay, Bob, would you like to either ask, with just audio or turn your camera on? You can go ahead, either way.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura. So Bijal, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry. So as Laura probably knows, I've been involved since 1976 with raising money for the foundation, and I loved your book. And like Beth, I'm just hoping that maybe you'll have another book in you. What do you think about Sia?
Oh, I do. I'm sure there are people who are just groaning, including my kids, because they still tell me that they don't remember a time in their lives when I wasn't working on the book. So I'm sure they will be thrilled to know that there's another one in the works. And, I'm looking forward to leading up to that with some magazine pieces. But there's 1,000 stories still to tell. So yeah, I'm relatively young. No, that's not true.
You are.
So
You're young.
You're very young.
I've got plenty of years of writing in me. So yeah, absolutely. I'm in.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think too, advice for people writing. I mean, it took you 8 years of so much wonderful work, and you got to know such a wonderful community, so I think, that is just fantastic part of it, wouldn't you say?
I think, part of the 8 years was because when I started, I was just completely clueless. I didn't have an agent. I had not the slightest idea how to publish a book. I just had a lot of enthusiasm and this driving feeling that I had to tell this story, because the more I learned, the more I was excited. And I knew that this is a phenomenal story, and nobody believes me. People off the street, when I tell them I'm telling the best story in medicine, where you can see the whole history of a disease from its characterization to almost a cure, when you can develop a whole set of drugs where you can actually change the action of a protein that's in the cell, and how that's never been done before. And I just go on and on and on. And people are surprised, but one of the reason, as I said, that it took me 8 years was the science kept moving ahead. I thought I was just going to tell the story of Kaleido when I started. And then, Bob Bell would say to me, oh, there's something else coming along. I can't tell you what it is, but there's something else. And so he was, pretty much stringing me along with, oh, there's going to be something even better. I'm not going to stop at 4% or 50% if there's something better coming along. And, this is also the story of personalized medicine. And it's such the beginning of an era that you can start with this little rare disease and do such monumental things in the whole of medicine. So, I just kept following the science, and that stretched on about 8 years. And then, I thought, all right, gene therapy is not happening in this book. I will stop now with this story. But that's the next era, and the cure is the next era. So yeah, it was a long haul, but there was a learning curve in there. So,
but you learned so much, and I think that is the fact. The journey hasn't stopped, and we've come so far since Dr. Dorothy Anderson, right? 1935 really discovers it, cystic fibrosis. It's just so exciting. And that's what was so powerful about your book. It was like, Beth and I talk about this all the time, but it was like reading it and it all happening again, even though we knew the story. It was so interesting. And he's very modest, but Dr. Paul Quinton, who's in your book, he's on this call, and and he discovered the basic defect in CF in the sweat gland. And so we're just so glad to have him. And of course, he's one of our favorite people. So, if he wants to pop up on little video or audio here, just let me know. But we're just so grateful for him as well. Marilyn, I don't know if you wanted to come on screen, let me know. I can bring you on as well. And so many other people who come.
I just have to butt in and say to Paul
absolutely.
Paul invited me out to the lab. Well, I kind of invited myself out, and then he embraced me. But it was seriously one of the best days of reporting ever. It was so much fun. I got to go into his lab. He told me his whole story, and it's just the sort of reporting day and that you long for as a writer. It was so much fun. I will never forget that day. And Paul was so generous with his time.
Paul's hands up right now. Can I allow you to talk, Paul?
Yay, there he is.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can.
I saw your hand up there.
Okay. No, I'm delighted to be able to participate in this. And I really welcome the opportunity to compliment Bijal, because the first thing I'm going to say is that I knew almost every character in her book, which is the only book I've ever read where I knew people. So it was really wonderful to see, the people that I knew and the things that they did, and see it evolve in that book. And it was very well written. Your skills in writing are really superb. I envy you. So thank you for doing that.
And Paul, I want you to hear a little bit more about, because I agree with you. It's like we know so many of these people. And when I got to the part about you, of course, I was like, yes, Paul, we love you so much. And you have such a huge part in this community. But were you on the edge of your seat as well? Because like you just said, you were reading about all these people you knew and that you worked with.
Well, I don't know if I was on the edge of my seat, but it certainly held my attention and got my attention and held it.
And well, that's because you're a scientist, right?
Right?
And we are just we worship you. But yes, go ahead.
Well, no, but it was really wonderful to have the thing recorded in a document, because I guess you know that I'm almost as old as cystic fibrosis. Unlike Bijal, I'm older, getting older.
A little bit.
Which is fabulous. You have cystic fibrosis and you're thriving, and you've made a difference in your own disease. I mean, how many people can say that in this world and in this life about a disease? There aren't that many. You are a rare human being that we owe so much to. I mean, my daughters, Maddie,
and my
Vanstone,
daughter.
Yeah. I mean, really.
Lives were changed for not only the family or the patients, but the families as well. Our lives have all improved thanks to the work that you did, and we're forever grateful.
Well, I thank you very much. That's very kind of you to say, but I was just there, and it was what needed to be done next. So I don't feel like it was a great, accomplishment of that sort of thing. It was just kind of what came next, and what seemed to be right, and it worked. I mean, I did have a lot of difficulty perfusing the sweat duct. That wasn't easy to do, and I guess I can say that, well, it must not have been very easy because nobody's done it since. That's not quite true, but there haven't been very many. But anyway, without that, it would have been very, very difficult. And I'm sure that somebody would have come along, probably not very long after that, with the correct explanation. And the problem with chloride impermeability, which most people shudder when they hear me say impermeability. What does that mean?
Well, I
So-
think you're so modest, and that's what someone else just wrote. You're so humble, and I agree. That's what makes you so lovable. Is you're just so,
Listen,
modest.
you better talk to my wife.
Go ahead, Bijal.
Actually, humility for a writer is actually a nightmare, because you have to keep poking at a person to get them to actually say what they should, just throw out there at you. Paul made me work, but he's such a good teacher that, we even had, after we met and I had my day at his lab and we had a wonderful lunch, we had several follow-up Zoom conversations, because learning the science and expressing the science in a way that I could tell a broad audience, who may not have had any science or biology, Paul was so patient walking me through that and talking about the ions and making them into characters going in and out of the cell. It was really amazing. Paul, I actually still have that Zoom recorded.
Wonderful.
You still have friends with Clara and Nate?
I do. I love them.
They're good buddies too.
Yeah, you're an
Anyway.
artist as well. We tweeted a long time ago, probably a year ago, when we did a podcast with, Dr. Paul Quinton, and the drawings that you did are beautiful. So everybody should check those out. They're just fantastic. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Well,
And Bijal, talk more about, and you're still here, Paul, feel free to jump in anytime, but your stories about Joe and Kathy O'Donnell, give us some more, as Beth said, behind the scenes story about them. They're still out there, milestones for CF with the CF Foundation, never quitting.
I know. And I knew that, when it was milestones 3, I knew Joe wasn't going to quit afterwards, because he just doesn't quit. And I'd be scared to see him without a big purpose, because that's what he does. He just goes from challenge to challenge to challenge. And it's heartbreaking to me that I haven't seen them in 2 years, because after you talk to somebody that frequently, and Joe and I still talk every month or so, we have a gossipy chat. You get so close to people that is just brutal not to see them for 2 years. But they were just, I also did really fun things with Joe. So I wanted to document more of his early childhood and, what sort of person he was before he became the Joe O'Donnell. And we went back to his mom's house and I got to interview his mom. This was just a couple of years before she passed. And so I got to go and hear Joe's stories when he was a kid. And we sat in, with his mom in the living room in which she'd grown up, which is amazing to be in that house. And he told me all these stories about, what happened with his brothers and his dad and his mom and what the holidays were like. And so I could really feel those stories in my heart when I was writing them, because I had been to the places that he told me about. And, so we had conversations that were just so enjoyable, as well as ones that were so heartbreaking. And, one of his, well, I won't say where it is, but there's a particular place where he likes to eat where, it's sort of a rite of passage if you're a friend of Joe to go to this place and have a meal on the beach. And it was so much fun. But, he helped me also make all the contacts I think he really vouched for me as I was doing this book, that I wasn't some nut job, because no one had ever heard of me. So he would vouch for me that I was a real journalist and an honest person, and that I could do this book. And I stayed with them. I stayed with Joe and Kathy so many times as I wrote this book, and they put up with so many interviews and questions, which is amazing, because when I first started in 2012 and interviewed them, and then decided I wanted to write a book, Joe said to me, he goes, so how many hours is this going to take? How many interviews? And I said, oh, I think it's going to be like 2 or 3 hours of your time. And that's about it. And over 8 years, I mean, I have hundreds of hours of interviews with Joe and Kathy.
Thank you, Joe and Kathy.
and Casey and Kate. I mean, the whole family, I got to know them so closely, but I really, it was hundreds of hours, and, in person, on the phone. Yeah, it's amazing that they didn't stop taking my calls, but it was, they are such special people. I'm closer to them, I think, than some of my family members. So
That's incredible. And
quite a journey.
It is. And what about Doris Tolson? She is, I think, 94 today. I mean, not today, but
yeah, now,
yes.
maybe even 95.
Could be.
Doris was amazing, because I had read this little book that she wrote, sort of an autobiography that gave scraps of the CF story. It was, I think, The Life of a Monarch or something like that, a reference to monarch butterflies that she was very fond of because of her father. And hearing her story from her, we met at a restaurant in a hotel right where she lived. And we met and we spoke for about 4 hours the first time, because I had heard that she was this amazing force of nature. And she had to be back then to command all this respect and to start a foundation at a time where, women didn't have that sort of pull. And I felt propelled when I was writing this book, because she was just like, when are you going to finish? So she certainly knows how to apply the pressure gently and firmly. But it was amazing to hear the story from she could tell me the story from 1955 on. She had met Dorothy Anderson. Dorothy Anderson had diagnosed Doris's daughter. So she had, the ultimate connection to this story. And then, shaping the foundation the way Doris did was just extraordinary. So these meetings were so pivotal for writing the book, because here was somebody who was there at the beginning of the foundation, who saw all the ups and downs, who saw the parts, the periods of history when the foundation wasn't doing as well, in the late 60s and early 70s, and how she was able to pull it together and put it on track together with Bob Dressing, who I also met. So it was very exciting, because I was able to go from person to person to get this thread that I could then put in the book. So that was very exciting and fulfilling, and I knew that I was getting the real story.
You did. You wove that beautifully. Like I enjoyed. I didn't know how the diagnosis came about, so I found that very interesting, and I can also relate to a lot of other rare diseases that are still looking for the diagnosis, right? And it kind of just gives you a clue into how difficult it is and can be, and that was an accomplishment in itself, just figuring that out to get a starting point, right? And going from there. But you wove that beautifully. But now I think we're going to do a draw
for a book.
Let's see, I'm gonna Two
breast
people? Am I going to pull two, I think, right?
Pull one now and then we'll
Pull
do
one
one
now
just
and
before we
one
end.
later. Okay.
Yeah, a little excitement here.
Marie Hagen.
All right, congrats, Marie. You're going to get an autographed book from Bijal.
There.
Marie was my neighbor until I guess till like 5 years ago.
Wow.
So that's awesome. So,
Hey, Marie.
Hey, Marie. So, if you can email your address and it will be mailed. And so congratulations. That's awesome.
If you want to sit, oh, wait, hold on. Oh, this is Bob. Let's see. I'm going to let him ask the question, but Marie, if you want to come on and say hello, just raise your hand and we will put on your microphone. Bob had another question. So if you can unmute yourself. There you go, Bob. Go ahead.
Hey, Bijal, have you been to NACFC or any other CF science meetings? And if you have, what did you think of them?
Oh, they were amazing. So I went to NACFC for about 6 years. And so I've been in withdrawal for the last 2 during the pandemic.
You and everybody else, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I also went to a couple of just the science conferences. Bill Sketch invited me to those. One was in Southwest, San Antonio, and one was up in Oregon. And it was just, cutting edge science for like 3 or 4 days straight. And it was astounding. And it was also really cool that I got to sit next to Bill Sketch because I could say, what about that one? How's that technology? What do you think of that idea? And he could dissect it just with such precision. You can see why he's so brilliant. And he could also, downgrade the explanation so that I could understand it. So I was exposed to some of the country's cutting edge science and scientists at these meetings, which as an ex-science person or, a former lab rat, I was thrilled. I got the really high quality science, lots of it, all these scientists who were willing to talk to me. It was great. I love the meetings. I can't wait to go this year.
Yeah. If you ever have interest in going to the European basic science one, you can let me know. It's another one that's just off the charts amazing because it's all just, it's a small 200 person basic CF science conference and it rocks your world kind of thing.
Oh, cool. I'll be in touch.
Okay.
And one of the other, thank you again, Bob. And one of the other things that you talked about, Bijal, was learning more about CF, that it is a much more diverse disease. It's not just Caucasian. And as we know, that awareness is being raised. And, we're in May CF awareness now. It's a perfect time to talk about it again. But people of color just are underdiagnosed. And so, we had talked about that in the podcast a little bit that we did, closer to when your book came out. So for you, it was an awareness, right? Something that you understood and learned about.
Yeah. And, I guess, the real credit goes to Dorothy Anderson, right? Because she had it in her very first paper where she had these little sections about the various patients she'd seen. And she had one child who was African-American, and she wrote that clearly this is not restricted by race. So she made that first very, very poignant observation. And, I've been sort of gathering more and more about the fact that it is a much more diverse disease than we previously thought. That is an article that I want to write in the very near future. So stay tuned for that one. But, it's a really wild thing because there turns out that there's a lot of Indians, and I'm Indian, so it naturally was very interesting to me, that are undiagnosed, and it's misdiagnosed as tuberculosis in northern India. And there might be actually quite a large population of people who have CF there. And so that was fascinating to learn that. And it's also interesting when you see the passage of the gene, you follow the different roots of the gene, spreading throughout Asia and Europe, and then Asia, and then the Middle East. It hurts a lot of people is the bottom line. So I hope that, more and more people get access to the drugs, because it is kind of tragic to see, these wonderful medicines out there and people not being able to get their hands on them. And I do get emails to that effect, which are very, very, they're very moving, and they're very depressing also, because people in countries where they have no access, either because they can't afford it or they've got a national healthcare system that won't negotiate with Vertex over the price. So,
or they don't even recognize the disease, right? We talked about Egypt when we were talking, so much work to be done still. Now, I muted Paul and Bob, but if you want to speak again, just raise your hands, because we definitely want to hear from you. And anyone else, this is a great opportunity for you to ask a question and get some behind the scenes from Bijal on her book. Bijal, is there anything you wanted that you think of that everyone would find interesting about some of the behind the scenes?
One of the behind the scenes things that I really enjoyed was talking to patients who had started to take the medicine, and their personal feelings and observations about how their body was changing in real time. And that was really exciting. But one family that I got to actually see the before and after was the Cheevers family, and they live in Massachusetts. It's about to give you their address, but they live in Massachusetts, and Laura and Kate Cheevers both have CF, and they're advocates, so I'm not outing anybody. And they started in one of the earliest clinical trials for Kalydeco, and they had a ton of health problems before they started on that drug. They had trouble gaining weight, all of the regular symptoms. And, one of the sisters was in for regular clean outs, several times a year. And I saw them when they were, middle school, going into high school. And they were very slender, but they'd been in good health. And then as I was wrapping up the book, I had the opportunity to go back and see them, and I could barely recognize them. There were these like healthy, gorgeous women and young women who were, in college, on their way to college, so healthy. I mean, I was embarrassed that I'm so out of shape and unhealthy, and they were in magnificent shape, and you could see how much the drugs had changed their lives. And to sit with the family and talk about, not just how it had changed the girls' lives, but their parents' lives as well, and freed up, their whole life had been dedicated, and they'd been enslaved really by this disease. And, every waking moment, worrying about the disease, providing treatments, worrying about the medicines. And now they actually had some free time, which was shocking for them and amazing to hear. So it's just, to hear about the trickle down effects, when the patients were doing well, and to see it myself, I don't know if I would have believed it if someone said, oh, they gained weight, they were able to grow properly and develop. And, it's hard to imagine all of that, except, when you see them over a span of 6 years, and then you're just like, wow, that little pill does that. So that was an amazing thing to witness.
It's amazing. Well, Madison, my daughter, was on Kalydeco, the first modulator, and I remember her day 2 telling me that she could breathe through her nose for the first time. And that to me, just, I didn't know she couldn't. And I think she didn't know she couldn't until she could, but it was that quickly. Like, she's like, Mommy, I can breathe through my nose. And I'm like, I was so happy, but so sad at the same time that all these years I hadn't known, right? So I had a quick question too. Do you, you haven't been able to attend the conferences, of course, because of the pandemic. Do you keep up with science on what's happening with CF?
I do. Some things more than others, because there's some elements of the CF research that I'm more interested in than others. And, I'm very, very interested in the gene therapies, the mRNA therapies, anything to do with stem cells. That's very, very intriguing to me, because I think that CF is really laying the foundation for so many other diseases. And what happens in CF sort of tells you what's going to happen in other rare diseases and even common diseases. So it's something that I try and keep somewhat abreast of, amidst being the COVID editor for 2 years, which takes up a lot of brain space. Yeah.
Oh, I bet.
And I also wanted to ask you, and to also just briefly go on what Beth was saying. So I have one daughter on Trikafta, one that had a reaction to it. But in that short period of time when they didn't realize how sick they were and then how much better they felt within days, it was incredible, a miracle for sure. And in reading about every family that you wrote about, one thing I noticed was our diagnosis stories are almost all the same.
Yeah.
Even after newborn screening, because it doesn't work for everyone, but my girls were born prior to newborn screening, and doctors either didn't believe that you had CF, misdiagnosed. Every time I just read the diagnosis stories in your book, I was like, wow, we've all had the same experience.
Absolutely.
I was really stunned by that, because, hearing Joe and Kathy's story with Joey, I thought, 25 years later, that couldn't possibly happen. We have the gene, we have the internet, we have so many tools for education. And hearing those stories, I was absolutely stunned, because I did do what was happening to families at the start of the millennium, which was basically 25 years after Joey was born, and all the same story time after time with different pediatricians. And it was kind of mind-blowing, disturbing and mind-blowing, that these families had this same reoccurring nightmare with the diagnosis and having to fight to get their child seen and tested. And it's always the parents who think, they're being fussy, they don't know how to raise a child, they're new parents, and every time the parents were right. So I was just flabbergasted by that.
Yeah, it is unbelievable. Why don't you pick another book name, and then this is your opportunity, everyone, to I'm just looking at this, what people are writing, but this is your opportunity. You can ask Bijal something about the book. You could ask her anything about someone in the book. So if you want to, because we will wrap it up pretty soon here, but would love it if there's a question from some other people that you want answered. What about, who's
the winner? There's the winner, Jose.
All right.
Damours. Congratulations. Jose, send your address in so that we can get the book out to you. If you haven't read it, you are going to love it. You're going to get your nose in, and it's going to be stuck in there until it's finished. And then you might go back again, because it is a wonderful, wonderful read. So congratulations.
Congrats. Well, I think that the best way maybe to wrap this up, Bijal, is tell us a little bit some more. I know you talked about this a little bit, but
Agreed,
kind
Bob.
of what what touched you the most, or maybe what you learned that really surprised you about CF?
I feel like there were surprises every day of the reporting. I mean, to still be learning now, after I, did the deep dive for 8 years. I mean, it's humbling, how little you know and how much more there is always to learn. But I think one of the things that was so shocking to me was what a systemic disease it was. And that, everyone thinks of, oh, the lungs. Well, it's everything. You've got that channel in every cell in your body, most of the cells in your body. And it's just so shocking how it can just wreak havoc throughout the body. But it's also fascinating that, Doris Tulson's daughter, for example, has G55-1D, one of the more severe mutations. She has a double copy of that. And yet she must have some amazing modifier genes that have allowed her to live healthily into her 70s. And I think that is also it's a peek into how complicated human genetics is. It's a complicated issue because, you think, all right, this person wouldn't have lived if you did the newborn screening, saw these mutations and think this person's going to be sick their whole life or might not even live. And then, there's a little twist in the story and you discover that, there are other genes at play, compensating, helping, working together. So I guess the biggest surprise was, in a biology book, you're always told, oh, this is the simplest single gene disease. There's nothing simple about this disease. And I think that was probably the biggest revelation because when I was still in science, I was doing some genome sequencing, gene hunting in Eric Lander's lab. And so I had seen parts of the process and to think, how little, we always said, oh, we know the gene, we'll figure out gene therapy, it'll be a breeze. It's not a breeze, it's really hard, which is why it's so exciting to see the progress with CF, to see it go from just a disease back in 1938, characterized, the gene is characterized, Paul characterizes the defect, seeing it tested in gene therapy, and then people coming up with a drug that can modulate proteins. This is for a simple genetic disease. So I think that is the thing that is most informative and instructive because, people say, oh, the Genome Project, it didn't really yield anything. And I say, look what happened with this supposedly simple disease. It's not simple. And yet look at the story. So I think that is what is so amazing to me. And also so exciting because even though it's complicated, there are so many scientists working on CF, which is another thing that's pretty extraordinary. You go to that conference, there are 5,000 people there and, thousands of scientists. Yeah. And focusing on this one disease, this one gene. So I think it's mind blowing. You can see my mind is still blown.
No, it's a beautiful answer. I just love that answer. And Megan wants to ask a question. So I'm going to ask you to unmute, Megan, and then go ahead. You're all set now.
Hi, I'm Meg from Atlanta. Before I ask my question, I just wanted to say thank you so much for this book. I feel like it was a personal gift to me. My son is 2, and he was born in February 2020 and diagnosed after birth with a newborn screening. And he was hospitalized pretty early, like when he was a month old. And for the first few months, I was not ready to learn anything. And as soon as I was ready to learn, it was like, hey, would you like this basically novelization of everything you need to know about your son's disease? It was like the most beautiful gift and just came at the best time. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me know.
I just got chills, Megan.
I know. And, please reach out to either Beth or myself. You can email at the foundation. We would love to help you in any way that you want.
Okay, yeah, I'm definitely plugged into the Georgia chapter. Excited for my first in-person Great Strides this month, so we're definitely getting involved. But I did have a question. I'm curious, what is the second most exciting medical story happening right now while I wait for Breath from Salt Part 2?
Oh, what isn't exciting these days? Vaccines are exciting. Sickle cell, which is another simple genetic disease, is very exciting. I sort of feel that CF and sickle cell are sort of on the same spectrum. You know, sickle cell is way more common. So I think a lot of the research, you know, they tag team with some of these results. And I think there's so much exciting stuff going on there that, you know, I'm excited to cover it. But vaccines, gene therapy, you know, I'm really convinced that gene therapy is the be all and end all. And it's very exciting to me. So it's something I hope to cover a lot in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. And you know what, Beth, why don't you pick another name, because we'll give away a Bonnell Foundation t-shirt.
Right on. Oh. Just here it is. Ilka Bond. Ilka Bond.
Okay. Well, congrats.
So, Ilka, if you can email or email your address to the Bonnell Foundation. Their address is in the chat somewhere there, I think, right?
Yeah, the email.
Email address. So if you can hit up the email address for the Bonnell Foundation and put your address in the t-shirt coming to you, that's awesome. From the Bonnell Foundation.
Thanks. Yeah. And I think, thank you, Beth. And I think the reason your book, like Megan said, is so important is, I mean, she's just coming into the disease. And to read that book is a luxury. I mean, a wealth of information Beth and I didn't have, because my daughters are 27 and 24 and Maddie's 20, correct?
Yeah,
so
that's correct.
It was just, it is the Bible of CF. And no, but really and truly.
I agree.
And because especially Megan, you know, with such a young child with CF, she probably doesn't have the community of CF mom and dads yet. So to read all those stories in there about all these parents, it's got to just fill your heart, because I felt that way. And I know Beth felt that way. And we have such a strong community because we've been in it so long. But I think that's one of the things when we talk to young moms is about community, about not feeling guilty, and so many different emotions. So your book is absolutely a treasure, for sure.
And
I was actually kind of worried that new parents were going to read it. I almost wanted to reverse the chapters so that they would know that it ends well. There's good stuff at the end, because there's a lot of ups and downs, and there's a lot of tragedy in that book. But you know, I tried to alternate tragedy with hope. But yeah, for a parent whose child was just diagnosed, I was a little worried how they would respond, because you got to get pretty far.
I will say it took a while to get through the first half, and then the second half I flew through.
Aw.
Thank you for keeping reading.
It's a story of hope, for sure. And I think for Megan, it's so amazing to be able to have that all put together so quickly and neatly to bring us up to date quickly, because we were kind of just struggling and trying to figure out this and that as we went. So even where we are now in the journey, I loved kind of feeling like I was caught up, because I started in the middle of the story, you know, like we started where the gene had been discovered, the defect in the gene had been discovered, and we were like grabbing from there. So I felt like I was caught up, and it was kind of in a neat little package. And I'm so excited for part 2. So there's certainly no pressure there again.
Now, we only have about 4 more minutes to go. And Bijal, I wanted to get to another question. This is from Marilyn. She asks if you can speak to your experience with the family's resilience when putting your book together?
I think that was a point that I also meant to make. You asked me what was surprising, and I think I'd never seen such a tight-knit community that was so united in its goal and so supportive of each other and other families. And that was actually really stunning to me. I went to a lot of fundraisers and I got to know people, and people were really tight and they were committed. And even when families were going through a very hard time, say one of the children was sick or hospitalized, doing cleanouts, there was so much support from other members of the community, and such amazing physicians too. I mean, I got very close to a number of physicians who, now I judge every physician by these CF physicians, and which means that I don't like many physicians.
Right. It's a high bar, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah, it's a very high bar. And also seeing what happened with the CF Foundation and the community, it's a real roadmap for other foundations who are struggling, because what the CF Foundation did, the way they brought people together, the way they focused the goals and helped the families and provided plans and roadmaps, other foundations have got to take a page from that playbook. And that was one of the things that I was really hoping would come out of this book. I was hoping that other parents would see the resiliency in this community, the hope and the strength and the alignment of goals, and basically just take it and use it for their own disease, because that's something you just don't see. And I looked at a lot of foundations and I couldn't find it, but I did hear from a lot of foundations who said that, everybody wants to follow the CF model and the model of this community. So that was, that's also why I did the sort of brain bending thing of focusing on families, the foundation, and the science, because you couldn't have the end result without each of those three threads. And that's why the book is 500 pages.
And worth every page. I mean, fabulous.
Absolutely.
Especially when you hear moms like Megan say what she said and how it impacted her. I mean, it's so important. And I think, your book's going to live on for forever and just be this great resource and emotional, wonderful, thing that people can read. Because I felt great after I read it. It was just so relatable. I don't think we have any more questions, and we do have to wrap up. So, Bijal, I just want to allow you to wrap up this webinar any way that you would like, whatever else you want to say. Whether we were talking to Bijal about doing some book tours so we can get her out there, because I think there would be a huge, people would love it to just come in person and get your book. But wrap this up any way that you would like. And then Beth and I will just say a couple closing words and we're done.
I would just say, keep me in your community, because, we've all been separated for a couple of years, but I'm not any less committed to continuing to follow the story and until it's done. And, that's just me. So just because the book is out doesn't mean I'm not following and I'm not thinking about you all. And just keep me close, because I want to keep telling this story.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are a wonderful, go ahead, Beth. We are a wonderful community. That is for sure.
We certainly are. And I would really ask anybody that's on this call tonight to make sure you share about this book, because it is a wonderful book. And tell people to get it, recommend it, because it's worth every, minute that you put into it. I got so much out of it. I'm going to probably read it again this summer by the pool. So yeah, I would like for people to just make sure they get it. Tell them it's a great story. It's, this is CF and tenacity, and this is our community. So yeah, I would like to see people just get the word out some more.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say it's living history. It comes alive. I think if you describe it to other people like that, this isn't like some boring historical book. This
Right.
is, you're very excited about getting to know all these people in the book. So I agree. And I just wanted to thank everyone. It was wonderful to have all of you. Thanks so much for your support and for your expertise and everything you've done for the CF community. We're so grateful to have you in our community, and we have some good things coming on the horizon, but let's remember it. We all have, you know, like we've talked about so many times, it's mentally challenging, and we are here for each other. So again, thanks to everyone. If you have any questions or follow up, please email us at the Bonnell Foundation. But Bijal, you're just a gem, and we love you. So thank you so
We
much.
sure do. Thank you, Bijal.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Hope to talk
everyone.
again soon. Thank
Have
you.
a great CF Awareness Month.